Hey folks, I'm Daniel and welcome back to Mining Stocks. Today we're going to be talking with Wes from Visionary Metals Corp. They're building a new nickel cobalt discovery in the central Wyoming area, and they recently had some really interesting news about a grant funding that they got approved through the state of Wyoming. Now, what's interesting about this company is there's a lot of uranium exploration companies that have popped up with the rise in the uranium price, but part of this whole green movement, nickel and cobalt is also very important. And this is probably one of the first deals I've seen in the past little while out of the Wyoming area. So I'm really, really excited to have you. Thanks so much for coming on, Wes. I think this is going to be a really exciting conversation. When I first saw your presentation, it really caught my eye. And the thing that really made it unique, I guess, was that it stood out amongst all the uranium companies because it wasn't a uranium company. So tell me a little bit about why you're doing a nickel cobalt company now and how you see the sector with what's currently going on in the geopolitical space.
Well, thanks, Daniel. Yeah, it's good to be on today. I guess I could start by saying that we always target new discoveries, right? I think that making new discoveries of new mineral resources is how you make the most money in the resource space, and so that's what our company's been focused on. And when we're exploring new areas, we try not to, have a blind eye in that, we're only looking for a specific commodity. We
Mm.
first looked at Wyoming to look at the gold potential in the South Pass Greenstone Belt. And what we found was that there was more potential for nickel sulfide there. Nickel is, to me, a very compelling investment right now. Um, there's been some talk about oversupply in the marketplace. I think that's pretty short lived. A lot of it's coming from Indonesian nickel mines that are basically, strip mines and have
Mm.
a very, very high carbon footprint. It's, kind of helped with the supply squeeze that we saw during COVID and with the Russian embargo, where nickel prices went to $50,000 a ton. But we're still at 17,000, which historically is a pretty good price per ton for nickel. So nickel, the reason we like it is used for stainless steel production. So it's a major component in stainless steel. There's only going to be more demand for stainless steel. It's actually one of the biggest components of a nuclear power plant. Um,
Interesting.
and so, stainless steel demand is expected to increase. And then it's also a major component of EV and hybrid vehicles. They use, and to produce an EV or a hybrid vehicle, you need about 3 to 4 times the nickel that you would use in a normal vehicle. So that's going to impact demand to the positive side as well.
Interesting. So I like that point because I was recently talking to someone in the uranium space and they mentioned that there's about 450 new nuclear power plants that are in the planning or production or sorry, permitting or construction phase. And it's interesting that, obviously stainless steel is very key. And with that trend continuing in the long term, folks are going to need more of it. Now, remind me again, is there a shortage that's currently going on with nickel cobalt in the states?
Well, cobalt's very scarce and it's very expensive, but that's a byproduct of nickel sulfide production, as is platinum group elements and gold to a lesser degree. So in our intercept, we do see byproduct levels of cobalt and platinum group elements like platinum, palladium. Platinum and palladium are used to make catalytic converters and semiconductors, and cobalt is part of the electric battery. So all the lithium ion batteries that Toyota makes and Tesla makes are using cobalt and nickel in them, primarily with the lithium. So there's the thing about nickel and cobalt, they're much more scarce than lithium is.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to find new resources. And I think that's why our discovery in Wyoming is so significant. One, because it is a new nickel sulfide discovery, and there haven't been many in recent history, especially in the Western United States. And Wyoming's a great mining jurisdiction. We produce about 40% of the country's coal. we're the number one exporter of electricity in the United States, and it's very pro mining here. As indicated by the recent investment that the state government has made in Visionary.
Cool. So you guys are a totally new discovery. It's not like an old mine that's.
No, there were this area where we're working um, used to be a uranium mining district. So in fact, my grandpa was actually involved in the discovery of uranium in Wyoming. And our team of geologists kind of grew up working in the uranium fields in Wyoming. And so we're very familiar with the geology. The uranium's found in much younger rock formations and sediments. And we've targeted those. A lot of the open pitable stuff has already been mined out, and there's still a few in situ uranium plays that don't require mining. Right, it's like more similar to an oil well than a mine. And so, there's still some uranium out there. We like to focus on things that are new, and so we're looking at the older rocks in Wyoming, not these younger sedimentary rocks that host uranium. Nickel, a lot of the deposits around the world were formed at about 2.7 billion years ago. So if you look at the deposits in Timmins or in Western Australia, the Kambalda district, they're all about 2.7 billion years old, and that's the age of rock that we're looking at in Wyoming. And so, while there wasn't a new discovery until we set out, I mean, we had our discovery hole on just the third hole ever drilled into these 2.7 billion year old rocks. So we have a pretty high hit rate so far on our drill holes, and that's the result of systematic exploration and really, understanding what it takes to make new discoveries and using all the tools that we have at our disposal to form, a geologic model that will lead you to more discoveries.
That makes sense. So I'm curious on how you actually came about the discovery in the first place. Like I'm sure, like you said, Wyoming is a very, very mining friendly area. There's a lot of folks that are already operating mines there. How did you guys come across this asset, and how did you find the nickel cobalt?
Well, it's interesting. So, when we were exploring for gold, we had noticed these ultramafic rocks that were outcropping, and these type of rocks are the rocks that you can find nickel in. And so you need a couple of things to create the right type of nickel that can be extracted in a mine. And so you need a source of nickel, which comes from these ultramafic rocks. You need a source of sulfur, which usually comes from ancient sediments like banded iron formation. And so what you want to see is these ultramafics in contact with that iron formation. And what happens is when these magmas come up from the earth, they melt all those ancient sedimentary rocks, and they take the sulfur and bond it with the nickel to make a nickel sulfide. And that's what's used for high grade battery production. It can be used for stainless steel. It's the best type of nickel that you can discover. And so that's what we, that was the clue that led us to discovery. And, it started with good old fashioned field geology work, right? Soil sampling, rock chip sampling. And then, once we had identified kind of a target area at King Solomon, we ran some ground geophysical surveys, and that showed us that there was chargeable metal in the rock, so that we did think there was a good chance that there would be nickel sulfide there. And the first two holes, we were a little bit off the target. We hit the iron formation, but it had a lot of sulfides in it. So we stepped into the, directly on top of the ultramafic and drilled into that, and hit 17 meters of 0.42% nickel.
Nice. So you guys were essentially looking for gold, and you were like, this is an interesting little bit of geology here.
Yeah, there's, um, a couple of our investors and one of my mentors is Stan Dempsey, and then a few of his investors that were the investors in Royal Gold, right? And they started that company. It was originally a 5 cent stock, and it's at $100 today. So, we had some key investors, and then Stan Dempsey started his career in uranium before he started Royal Gold. So he was actually a competitor of my grandfather's, and um, he saw that we were doing some exploration work in Wyoming and said, "Look, I think you should take a look at this King Solomon area." And he had some claims there, which we purchased, and gave it a good solid look. And initially we weren't sure what the target was. We just saw that there was a lot of really interesting geology. In these type of rocks, you can find gold deposits. You can find volcanic massive sulfide deposits that contain copper and zinc. You can also find nickel deposits. And so what we tapped into first was a nickel deposit. And so that's what our main focus is now. And I think that the future for nickel is going to be really bright. I think this, the supply with the Indonesian production is going to be somewhat short lived. And if you look out to 2026 to 2030, I think demand is going to outpace supply significantly.
Okay, so let's get into that. So you see this Indonesian supply essentially kind of falling out of trend, not necessarily because they run out from, or is it because of how they're doing it?
Well, it involves an incredible amount of deforestation, right? It's all on islands right next to the ocean. There's lots of videos if you Google Indonesian nickel mining of the amount of pollution that's coming off of those. So,
Hmm.
if you're concerned about the environment and you want to find a solution, how do we make new electric vehicles, but we don't have this huge carbon footprint? The key is to do it in places and jurisdictions that have some of the best environmental standards in the world. Indonesia is not one of those places. Wyoming is, right? And so
Mhm.
and the footprint of a nickel sulfide mine versus a nickel laterite mine, which is like the type of strip mines that are in Indonesia, is much smaller, right?
Mhm.
So we can do a lot more with first world underground mines than they can do with the open pit laterites. And the carbon footprint and the environmental cost is far less. So, in my opinion, the best places to mine nickel are going to be in first world countries that have these environmental standards, and with nickel sulfide mines that are a lot less. They really don't have any pollution associated with it.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at like when you said, I was like taking a look, and it's like, this is BBC that's talking about how much, and look, you can see in that other shot right there, you can see the pollution coming off. So that's just horrible. That's just absolutely
Yeah.
decimating that area.
And you can look at Lundin's Eagle Mine to see how we do it in the first world as well, right? I mean, it's very, very small footprint, very, very organized. The tailings from these type of deposits are actually alkaline generating, and in some cases, nickel tailings can be used to sequester carbon. That's something that Canada Nickel is exploring right now. For their Canadian deposit.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like if you think about just the additional amount of infrastructure and rules that you have to go through in the first world country, like you just can't be dumping stuff into the ocean like that. Like it would be a riot. Like you just can't do that kind of pollution. And I feel like also over the past few years, like there's been a lot of innovation in the space that lets you mine, like few years, I mean like few decades, there's been a lot of innovation that's let you mine in green ways. And like countries like Indonesia, I'm sure that they just want to get the lowest cost out there and just sell because they're like, they want to feed their families, right? They have a different kind of problem than we have. So I do see what you're saying. It's definitely not a sustainable way. And I feel like as soon as like mass population finds out about the type of contamination that their little green electric car there is causing,
Yeah.
um, things are definitely going to change. But why 2020? You said 2025, 2026 is when you see things shifting?
Yeah, it's just that the nickel sulfide mines that are in production right now have a fixed amount of production, and so they already have defined those mineral resources, and so supply is supposed to be reduced when you get into 2026 and beyond. And so now when you look at an exploration story like ours and trying to identify and develop a new nickel sulfide district in the United States, that process takes 5 years anyway, right? So
Right.
we want to be ready for development when there is a increase in demand and a shortage of supply,
Yeah.
and that's really the key to our strategy is to be ready with a great development asset in a great jurisdiction when the market turns. And so, a lot of people talk about being contrarian investors, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to pull the trigger when the prices of the commodity are down. In nickel, I'm not sure. I think the prices are down from $50,000, but they were only there for like a couple of weeks, right? And so,
Right.
we're still above where we were, pre-COVID, right? And so I think, uh, you know, the sentiment that, oh, well, there's an oversupply of nickel, it's not really true, right? I mean,
Right.
$17,000 a ton, still quite a bit higher than our current copper prices, right? And if you look at copper mines across the world, there's a lot of copper mines that are 0.4%, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's, kind of a thing that people miss about nickel. And, it's never, I think it's until the EV and the hybrid vehicles came along, your only demand was for stainless steel, right, and other specialty products, metal,
Hmm.
alloys and things like that. Um, but the uses for nickel are increasing all the time, and so I
Hmm.
think it's going to be a very sought after commodity, and it's one that's very difficult to find. So I think that's why our discovery is so significant.
Yeah, I like how you're thinking ahead like that. Like you're looking at the market and you're saying, okay, yes, now this is something that's like not sexy to a large portion of, we'll call them like, generalist investors, people who don't do too much due diligence, like research into the sectors and just kind of try to hop on trends. But it is something that's a fundamentally like smart approach because you're getting in before the trend hike. Like you make money when you buy, not when you sell, right? So it's important when you get in. And I'm curious about your like how you approach your philosophy for building companies. Like, uh, being a CEO of this mining company, and do you want to take it into production? Is that your personal ambition?
If you're not looking for assets that can be taken into production, I think you're in the wrong business, right? And so anybody that just assumes that they're going to find something and somebody else is going to come in and pay you a lot of money for it, uh, I think is a little bit foolish. I mean, you need a development partner. There's lots of mining companies out there, but you're going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting as the discoverer and developer of the project, right?
Right.
So you have to be thinking about what a production scenario would look like in the future, even when you're making your first discovery. So my philosophy is I always look at, okay, if we find something in this location, can we get a permit to mine it? Number one, right? Do we have infrastructure in place? And Wyoming checks all the boxes. We have a high tension power line that goes right next to, within a couple hundred yards of our discovery drill hole. There's a natural gas pipeline on that same right of way and a heavy haul road from the previous uranium mining. And it's in a completely uninhabited part of the state that desperately wants mining to return. They haven't had mining there since 1982 when the uranium mine shut down. So it's really left a big void. and we've seen the economic impacts of that in central Wyoming. So, you know, I think there's in Wyoming now there's bipartisan support for new mine development, especially for critical and strategic minerals like nickel and cobalt.
Interesting. And so why, like the grant that you got, is that from the state of Wyoming or is that from the federal?
Yeah, no, that's from the state. I think maybe the first exploration grant given by a state in U.S. history. Um, the Wyoming has been very innovative in its approach. A lot of people don't realize, but we're the number one generator of wind power in the country. So even though we've been a coal producer, we've been producing more energy for the country than any other state. We're also into the green transition, right? We're also producing a lot of wind energy. And so they've established a fund in Wyoming that was initially to focus on cleaner ways to produce energy, right? So projects that took advantage of orphan natural gas wells, clean coal technologies, and new green tech for the oil industry. And in November, we had a field trip with some of our state senators and representatives, and then some staff members for our congresswoman and both U.S. senators. And what came out of that was, why couldn't we include critical and strategic minerals exploration into our grant program? And so we applied, and we've been recommended by the Wyoming Energy Authority for $1 million in funding. And we put together a budget in our application for about $3 million total. So we're going to contribute $2 million in funding, and the state's going to contribute $1 million. So that's a big discount on your exploration dollars going to work, right? When the state's willing to step up and fund some of it. I think it's the precursor to federal grants. And we've seen that in the mining space already as a part of the Inflation Reduction Act. The Department of Defense and Department of Energy have been given the green light to start funding mining projects for critical and strategic minerals. So these are commodities that we use a lot of, but we don't produce enough of in the US. And I think because of all the geopolitical competition that's going on right now between the BRICS countries and the United States, clearly we're losing the commodities battle right now, right? We're almost 100% reliant on China and Russia for our cobalt and nickel supplies, and it's the same thing with other rare earths as well. And so there's a real movement that's been recognized by the federal government that, hey, look, maybe we need to produce more of these commodities domestically and help companies, identify new resources. And so that's, the investments that the Department of Defense has made so far have been in the Stibnite project in Idaho, which belongs to Perpetua Minerals. And then there's also been a grant given to Talon for nickel exploration in Minnesota. And I like to think because Wyoming has had such a strong history in mining that this may present a better investment opportunity than Idaho or Minnesota, where you do have some opposition to mining.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have already got a bunch of infrastructure. It's a mining town that's been there for a while. I guess the only it's not really a question of will a mine be successful in Wyoming? It's will this one be one of the ones that are successful? Because Wyoming is a mining state. You guys do that. So, what do you have going on in the next little while? I kind of like to look for what are the key inflection points or events that a company has, which I should keep an eye out for, because obviously that's when other folks will hear about you more. You just announced that you received that grant last week, so that's a third of your costs cut down, which is great for managing dilution and cash flow. But what else? What do you have as your key key metrics that you're tracking to see if you're on the right path over the next 12 to 18 months?
So, the first thing that we're going to do this year is fly a uh, electromagnetic survey over the entire area of interest. And what that does is it tests for high concentrations of chargeable metal in the ground. So similar to the way we found King Solomon with the geophysical, ground geophysical surveys. The difference is we can cover much bigger areas because these are helicopter surveys, and they show you where the high grade massive sulfides are. So that's kind of the key component. What we've hit at King Solomon is disseminated nickel sulfides. So there's small grains of nickel throughout the rock. When you get into massive sulfide, the whole ore is sulfidic, and so that has a much higher grade to it, and so that's what we're doing. I think getting the results from that and being able to identify multiple targets throughout this district is going to be a real milestone for us. It's something that I think a lot of the strategic investors and the nickel producers are looking at. And then we'll be drilling starting in July, and so the drill results are typically what really drives value for a junior company. And then I think also once we're just in the final stages of finalizing our agreement with the state of Wyoming. They've already put out press releases saying that we've been recommended for funding. So I think once we've locked that in and we get the results from the geophysical survey, those are two value drivers. And then also the drilling. I think the drilling is usually where you see the most value creation in exploration.
So I'm probably going to keep an eye out for that geophysical survey because that once that goes out and you kind of see where the masses are of nickel sulfide, you'll be able to really target those effectively in your drill program, which will result in some really cool findings. So that's smart that you guys are taking that approach because obviously it's a large landmass. You can't drill all of it. So you want to make sure that you hit the right spots. So having someone fly over, target the right places, that's definitely going to be a much more efficient use of funds and also result in some really exciting holes potentially.
Yes, absolutely, and that's our goal.
Well, I'd love to keep in touch, Wes. Maybe we'll circle back here in like a month or so, and I'm going to keep an eye out on what you guys are up to. I think it's a really interesting story. I like how you're not with the trends because as much as there's opportunity in the trend, the real money is buying when everybody else isn't, and then selling when everybody else is buying. So finding opportunities like that, and it's I like how you're thinking about it too. How you got into this because hey, this is something that's a real asset that can go into. I believe you believe that you can go into production, and then based off of that, you've also thought about the trend overall in the market and thinking, okay, if I get in now, because you're obviously you don't need to torture yourself with building a mine. Like you have other ways you could probably do pretty well for yourself. So it's a good sign that you've kind of done that calculation of risk and have taken it on.
Yeah, it's a difficult business, but it's one that my family's been in for 3 generations. We take on these risks with other sophisticated investors at a very early stage. So this company has been largely self-financed by about 10 to 12 individuals, and we collectively own about 75% of the stock. And
Nice.
so I'm the largest shareholder. I don't take a salary. We're in it to create long-term value for our shareholders, and my interests are aligned with the other shareholders of the company. So I think it's important, to get through the early stages, the highest risk stages of exploration, with private funding, right? With mining savvy investors, and that's what we've done here. And so now, it's the first opportunity that we've really had to present it to the market as a whole, and I think just informing people that we've made a new nickel discovery and being able to market it and for them to get to know our company and what the future might look like for this company. I think that could be a key value driver for the share
When
price
did you
as well.
when did you guys go public again?
We went public in. We did a reverse takeover of Visionary in 2020, I believe.
Nice.
So, we've spent the last couple of years trying to figure out this area that had never been explored before. And, in 2022, we made a drill hole discovery and have been working on it ever since. So,
Nice.
it's been, I think, typically, if you look at what Robert Friedland says, a lot of times it takes 10 years to make a discovery and, get through your permitting process, right? It may take another 10 years to put these things into production. So I think we're well ahead of that curve in Wyoming. And,
Mhm.
I think if we can generate some great results this summer, we can really put our foot on the gas pedal and work toward development.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys are at a good inflection point, and it's kind of like there's this video of Mark Andreessen from A16Z. He was talking about how in tech funding you have pre-seed, you have seed, you have Series A, and the whole goal at each stage that you progress is de-risking your company, your asset in this case. And so you guys had the high risk, which was like before doing the RTO, and even before you had some nice drill holes where you needed like only sophisticated investors because they were the only ones who could see that far into the future and be able to see that trend. And that's why these guys make a lot of money, right? It's because you have that experience and you can take that calculated risk. And then now you've de-risked since that stage a few other levels. And so now it's really sounds like you're at that key inflection point where it's like this is where it goes from like seed to like Series A. Like I think of it as like pre-product market fit to product market fit. It goes from we think we have something here to this is how much we have, and that's all. That's always a really exciting time. I think it was Visual Capitalist that made a chart that talked about the first spike is in the discovery, and then the next one is in production. So very
Yes.
excited to see what you guys have in store.
Yeah, well, I think the key point is to keep making discoveries while you're working toward production, right? And
Yeah.
to, that that avoids that dip after the initial discovery. So that's really the way we like to approach it is to keep making new discoveries while we're de-risking the ones we've already made.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Wes. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. We'll be in touch, I'm sure.